In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, Elara finds a canvas that paints itself. Whispers call her, shadows move, and the stars watch. Each stroke pulls her deeper into a cosmic void. Will she create a masterpiece or become one? Chapter 1. The canvas in the attic. The fog clung to the hills like a shroud, muffling the world beyond the warped iron gates of Blackthorn Manor. Elara Voss stood at the threshold, her breath visible in the chill autumn air, her leather satchel slung over one shoulder. The manor loomed before her, its spires clawing at the grey sky, windows like hollow eyes staring down. She had come to this forgotten corner of Eldergloom, a town so small it barely existed on maps, seeking something solitude, perhaps, or inspiration, maybe even answers. Her mother's death had left her with little but questions and a crumbling estate she'd never known existed until the solicitor's letter arrived. Elara adjusted her scarf, the wind tugging at its edges, and pushed the gate open. It groaned, a sound that seemed to echo from the bones of the earth. The gravel path crunched under her boots as she approached the manor's entrance, its oak door carved with vines that seemed to writhe in the dim light. She fumbled with the rusted key, her fingers trembling not from the cold but from a strange anticipation she couldn't name. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of old wood. The foyer was grand but decayed, its chandelier dangling like a spider's web, crystals dulled by time. Portraits lined the walls, stern faces of ancestors she didn't recognize, their eyes seeming to follow her as she moved. Elara shivered, pulling her coat tighter. She had no love for old houses, with their creaks and shadows, but she needed a place to paint, to think, to escape the noise of the city and the weight of her grief. Her mother had never spoken of Blackthorn Manor. The solicitor had been vague, mentioning only that it had been in the family for generations. Passed down through a line Elara barely knew. She wasn't sure why she'd come, curiosity, perhaps, or the faint hope that this place might hold a piece of her mother she'd never known. Her sketchbook was empty, her canvases untouched for months. Maybe here, in this desolate place, she could find the spark she'd lost. The first day passed in a blur of exploration. The manor was a labyrinth of narrow halls, locked doors, and rooms filled with sheet-draped furniture. She found a parlor with a cracked mirror, a library with books so old their pages crumbled at her touch, and a kitchen where the air smelled faintly of ash. By evening, she'd claimed a small bedroom on the second floor, its window overlooking the fog-choked valley. Sleep came fitfully, the house groaning as if alive, the wind whispering secrets she couldn't decipher. The attic called to her on the second day. She hadn't planned to explore, its attics were cliché, after all, full of cobwebs and forgotten junk, but a nagging curiosity pulled her toward the narrow staircase at the end of the hall. The steps creaked under her weight, each one protesting, as if warning her to turn back. The air grew colder as she ascended, the scent of dust giving way to something sharper, like ozone after a storm. The attic door was heavy, its hinges rusted. Elara pushed it open with a grunt, and a shaft of pale light spilled from a single round window, illuminating a space cluttered with crates, trunks, and broken furniture. Dust motes danced in the beam, and the silence was so complete it felt like a presence. She stepped inside, her boots leaving prints on the floorboards, and scanned the room. Nothing remarkably till her eyes fell on the canvas. It stood against the far wall, propped on a wooden easel that looked older than the house itself. The canvas was large, nearly as tall as Elara, its surface unnaturally pristine despite the grime around it. No dust clung to it, no cobwebs draped its edges. It was blank, a perfect void of white, yet it seemed to hum with a subtle energy, like a heartbeat just beyond hearing. Elara's breath caught. She was a painter, had been since she could hold a brush, but she'd never seen a canvas like this. It wasn't just empty, it was waiting. She approached slowly, her shadow stretching across the floor. The attic felt smaller now, the walls closer, as if the space were contracting around the canvas. Up close, she saw faint traces of some, perhaps, or smudges, that vanished when she focused on them. She blinked, tilting her head. Was that a shadow moving beneath the surface? No, it was her imagination, surely. The light was dim, the air heavy with the weight of the manor's history. "Who left you here?" she murmured, her voice swallowed. By the silence, she reached out, hesitating, then brushed her fingers against the canvas. It was cold, unnaturally so, like touching a frozen lake. A jolt ran through her, not painful but sharp, like static. She pulled her hand back, heart pounding. The canvas remained blank, but she could have sworn it shimmered for a moment. A ripple like water disturbed by a stone. Elara stepped back, her gaze fixed on the canvas. She should leave it, she knew. Take her things, go back to the city, forget this place. But artists were fools for mystery, and she was no exception. She dragged the easel to the center of the attic, the scrape of wood against wood echoing like a warning. The canvas seemed heavier than it should have been, resisting her efforts as if reluctant to move. She set it beneath the window, where the light could catch it, and studied it again. Nothing, just a blank canvas. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching her, its emptiness a challenge, a dare. She rummaged through a nearby trunk, hoping to find something: old paints, brushes, anything to explain why this canvas was here. She found nothing but moth-eaten cloth and a cracked mirror that reflected her face in fragments. Frustrated, she sat on a crate, staring at the canvas. The attic was silent, but the silence felt alive, pressing against her ears. Hours passed, or maybe minutes' time seemed slippery in the attic. The light from the window shifted, casting long shadows that seemed to curl toward the canvas. Sketchbook lay open on her lap, but her pencil remained still. She couldn't draw, not yet. The canvas demanded her attention, its blankness a void that pulled at her thoughts. She imagined painting on it bold strokes of crimson, deep blues, a portrait of something vast and unknowable. But what? Her mind conjured images of stars, of faces half-formed, of eyes that burned with secrets. A sound broke her reverie, a faint whisper, like breath against glass. She froze, her eyes darting around the attic. Nothing moved, but the air felt heavier now, charged. The whisper came again, not words, but a rhythm, like a chant from a dream. It seemed to come from the canvas itself, though that was impossible. Elara stood, her chair scraping the floor, and approached the canvas again. She leaned close, her breath fogging the air, and listened. Nothing. Just her imagination, frayed by the manor's gloom. She laughed, a brittle sound, and shook her head. "You're losing it, Elara," she muttered. But as she turned away, she caught a glimpse of something, a flicker of color, a shadow that wasn't hers. She spun back, heart in her throat. But the canvas was blank again. Or was it? There, in the upper corner, a faint smudge of grey, like smoke trapped under glass. She blinked, and it was gone. The attic felt colder now, the light dimmer. Elara's hands trembled as she gathered, her things, her sketchbook slipping to the floor. She didn't pick it up. She needed air, needed to be anywhere but here. She stumbled down the stairs, the canvas's presence lingering like a weight on her shoulders. In her room, she locked the door, though she knew it wouldn't matter. The manor was alive, or something in it was, and it had found her. That night, sleep eluded her. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and the whispers returned not from the attic, but from within her own mind. She saw the canvas in her dreams, its surface no longer blank, but swirling with colors that didn't exist, shapes that defied geometry. Faces emerged and dissolved, their eyes fixed on her, their mouths moving in silent pleas. She woke with a gasp, her heart racing. The room too dark, too small. Morning brought no relief. The fog was thicker, the manor quieter, as if holding its breath. Elara tried to paint, setting up her easel in the parlor, but her brushes felt wrong, her colors dull. Her thoughts kept drifting to the attic, to the canvas that waited there. She told herself it was just a canvas, nothing more but the lie. Tasted bitter. It was something else, something ancient, something that didn't belong in this world. By noon, she was back in the attic. The canvas hadn't moved, but it seemed larger now, its presence filling the room. She sat before it, her sketchbook forgotten, and stared into its emptiness. Hours passed, the light fading, the whispers returning. They were clearer now, not words, but emotions, longing, fear, a hunger that wasn't human. Elara's hand twitched, reaching for a brush she didn't have. She wanted to paint, needed to paint, but the canvas seemed to demand something more than pigment. It demanded her. She didn't leave the attic that night. The manor was silent, the fog a curtain around the world. The canvas stood before her, blank but alive, its surface a mirror to something she couldn't yet see. Elara knew she should destroy it, burn it, flee this cursed place. But she didn't, she couldn't. The canvas had chosen her, and she was already its own. Chapter 2. Whispers of the attic door creaked as Elara pushed it open. The sound sharper than she remembered, like a bone snapping in the silence. The air was heavier today, thick with the same ozone temps that had lingered yesterday, now laced with something sweeter, almost cloying like overripe fruit. The round window cast a sickly light, its edges blurred by the fog that pressed against the glass. The canvas stood where she'd left it, centered in the attic, its blank, surface gleaming as if polished by unseen hands. Elara's heart thudded, a mix of dread and exhilaration as she stepped inside. She hadn't meant to return so soon. After last night's dreams, those swirling colors, those eyeless faces, she'd sworn to stay away, to pack her things and leave Blackthorn Manor behind. But the canvas had wormed its way into her thoughts, a splinter she couldn't ignore. Her sketchbook lay abandoned in her room, its pages still empty, while her fingers itched for a brush. She was an artist, damn it. An artist didn't run from inspiration, no matter how strange it felt. Elara set her satchel down, the clink of paint tubes and brushes loud in the quiet. She'd brought her supplies, telling herself it was just curiosity, just a need to prove the canvas was nothing special. But as she approached it, her resolve wavered. The canvas seemed larger today, its edges sharper, as if it had grown overnight. The attic felt smaller, the walls leaning in, the shadows pooling like ink in the corners. She swallowed, her throat dry, and set up her easel beside the canvas, mimicking its position under the window. The whispers started as she unpacked her paints. Soft at first, like leaves brushing stone, they grew into a rhythm, a pulse that matched her heartbeat. She froze, brush in hand, and glanced around. The attic was empty, but the sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, curling around. Her like smoke. She shook her head, trying to focus. Just the wind, she muttered, though the window was sealed tight. The fog motionless outside. She squeezed a dollop of crimson onto her palette, the color vivid against the attic's muted grays. The canvas stared back, its blankness a challenge. Elara dipped her brush, hesitating. What should she paint? A landscape, perhaps, to tame this strange place. A portrait of her mother, to anchor herself. Or something abstract, to match the chaos. In her mind, the whispers grew louder. Not words, but a feeling, urgency, hunger, a need to create. Her hand moved before she could think, the brush touching the canvas. The first stroke was wrong. The crimson smeared, not as she intended, but in a jagged arc, like a wound. Elara frowned, wiping the brush and trying again. Another stroke, this. Time blew, but it twisted under her hand, curling into a shape she hadn't planned to spiral, tight and endless, like a galaxy trapped in paint. She stepped back, heart racing. The canvas was still mostly blank, but the colors seemed alive, pulsing faintly as if breathing. What the hell? She whispered, her voice trembling. She reached out, touching the spiral. The paint was dry, so as if it had been there for years. Her fingers tingled, the same static jolt she'd felt yesterday, stronger now. The whispers surged, a chorus of voices too faint to understand, yet they pulled at her, urging her to keep going. She grabbed another brush, her movements frantic, and painted a slash of black, a curve of gold. Each stroke warped, the canvas reshaping her work into patterns she didn't recognize. Eyes that flickered and vanished, hands reaching from nowhere, stars that burned in impossible colors. Elara dropped the brush, stumbling back. The canvas was no longer blank. It held fragments, jointed shapes, half-formed faces, a sky that wasn't a sky. None of it was hers. She hadn't painted those things, not consciously. Her chest tightened, the air too thin. The attic was freezing now, her breath visible, the shadows twisting like smoke. The whispers were clearer, a single word repeating. Paint. She should have run. She knew it, deep in her bones, the way prey knows a predator's gaze. But artists were fools, and Elara was no exception. She picked up the brush, her hands shaking, and painted again. This time, the canvas obeyed, letting her form a Faisa woman's, with sharp cheekbones and eyes like voids. It was her mother, or a version of her, but wrong. The features too angular, the expression too knowing. Elara's hand froze mid-stroke. The face moved, its lips parting as if to speak. She screamed, dropping the brush, and the face dissolved, leaving the canvas blank again. The attic spun around her, the walls pulsing like a heartbeat. The whispers were gone, replaced by a silence so deep it hurt. Elara clutched her head, trying to anchor herself. It was a trick of the light, a hallucination. She was tired, grieving, alone in this cursed house. But the canvas stared back, its surface pristine, daring her to try again. She needed answers. This wasn't just a canvas, it couldn't be. She turned to the attic's clutter, searching for anything that might explain it. She tore through crates, tossing aside moldy books and broken trinkets. In a corner, half buried under a tarp, she found a small leather journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. The cover bore a similar spiral, like the one she'd painted. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The journal belonged to someone named Elara Voss, dated 1783. Her ancestor, perhaps. The handwriting was erratic, the words feverish. The canvas is not ours. One entry read. It came from the stars, or somewhere. Deeper, it paints what it wants, not what we choose. Another page. I tried to burn it, but it would not burn. It knows me now. The final entry was a single sentence, scrawled in ink that looked too fresh. It will never let me go. Elara's blood ran cold. She dropped the journal, its pages fluttering like wings. The canvas hadn't moved, but it felt closer, its presence a weight on her chest. The attic door slammed shut, though she hadn't touched it. The light flickered, the shadows stretching toward her like fingers. She backed away, her boots catching on a loose board. The whispers returned, louder, a chorus of voices chanting her name. Elara, Elara, Elara. She grabbed her satchel, intending to flee, but her eyes locked on the canvas. It was blank again, but not empty. It shimmered, a faint glow pulsing at its edges like a doorway to somewhere else. She saw herself reflected in it, not her face, but her essence, her fears, her need to create. The canvas knew her, just as it had known Alaric. It wanted her to paint, to give it form, to let it be. Hand moved to her brush, almost against her will. She didn't want to paint, but she couldn't stop. The canvas was a void, and she was falling into it. She dipped the brush in black, the whispers guiding her, and made a single stroke. The canvas drank it, the paint spreading like blood, forming shapes she couldn't control. A hand, a face, a star field that stretched into infinity. The attic faded, the world narrowing to the canvas and her brush. Hours passed, or days, she couldn't tell. The fog outside thickened, the manor groaned, and the canvas grew. It wasn't just a canvas anymore. It was a mirror, a window, a god. Elara painted, her hands moving without thought, her mind unraveling. The whispers were her voice now, or maybe she was theirs. The canvas was no longer blank, and neither was she. It had claimed her, and she had let it. Chapter 3. The face that wasn't there, the attic, was no longer just a room. It was a cage, a temple, a void. Elara stood before the canvas, her breath shallow, her hands stained with paint that wouldn't wash off. The air was thick, heavy with that strange ozone scent, now mixed with something metallic, like blood or rust. The round window above cast a pallid glow, the fog outside so dense it seemed to pulse, as if the manor were adrift in a sea of mist. The canvas loomed, its surface no longer pristine, but marked with chaotic swirls and half-formed shapes. Her work, or something else's. She couldn't tell anymore. Elara hadn't left the attic since yesterday, or maybe the day before. Time was slippery here, hours bleeding into each other like paint on wet canvas. Her satchel lay in a corner, brushes scattered, tubes of paint squeezed empty. She'd tried to stop painting, to walk away, but the canvas pulled her back, its blankness a taunt, its whispers a command. The journal she'd found Elara Voss's fevered ramblings lay open on a crate, its words burned into her mind. It paints what it wants. She hadn't touched it since, but its presence was a weight, a warning she couldn't heed. The whispers were louder now, not just a rhythm, but fragments of speech, disjointed and urgent. See, paint. No, they curled around her, threading through her thoughts until she wasn't sure which were hers. She gripped a brush, its bristles caked with dried paint, and faced the canvas. Her hands shook, not from cold, but from a deeper fear, one she couldn't name. The manor groaned around her, floorboards creaking as if footsteps circled the attic. The shadows moved when she wasn't looking, stretching toward the canvas like worshippers to an altar. She dipped the brush in indigo, a color she'd always loved for its depth, its mystery. The canvas seemed to hum as she touched it, the paint spreading in a smooth arc. She wanted to paint something simpletary, a horizon to reclaim control, but the canvas had other plans. The indigo twisted, forming an arch like a doorway, then dissolved into a smear of shadow. Elara cursed under her breath, trying again. This time, she painted a line, straight and deliberate, but it curved under her brush, becoming an Ajar single. Unblinking eye that stared back at her. She stumbled back, the brush clattering to the floor. The eye was gone, the canvas blank again, but her heart pounded as if it had seen her soul. The whispers surged, a chorus now, chanting, "Look, look, look." Elara pressed her hands to her ears, but the sound was inside her, vibrating in her bones. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing it to stop, but when she opened them, the canvas wasn't blank anymore. A face stared back at her. It was faint, like a sketch in fog, but undeniable. A woman's face, or something like a woman's, with sharp cheekbones and lips that curved in a smile too wide to knowing. Her eyes were voids, not black but empty, as if they led to somewhere else. Elara's breath caught, her body frozen. The face was familiar, a shadow of someone she knew, her mother, perhaps, or herself, but wrong, distorted, as if seen through a warped mirror. She blinked, and the face vanished, leaving the canvas blank once more. "No," Elara whispered, her voice hoarse. "No, that wasn't there." She stepped closer, searching the canvas for any trace of the face, but it was smooth, untouched. Her hands trembled as she touched it, expecting that static jolt, but the surface was cold and still. The attic was silent now, the whispers gone, but the absence was worse, like the calm before a storm. She backed away, her eyes darting to the shadows, which seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. The manor was alive, or something in it was. The attic door, which she'd propped open with a crate, was closed again. She hadn't heard it move. The window's light flickered, though the fog outside was still, and the air grew colder, her breath forming clouds. Elara's gaze returned. To the canvas, its blankness a lie. It had shown her something, and it wanted her to see more. She needed to understand. The journal wasn't enough. Valoric's words were too vague, too mad. She turned to the attic's clutter, her movements frantic, tearing through crates and trunks. Dust choked the air, stinging her eyes, but she didn't stop. In a corner, beneath a pile of moldy canvas scraps, she found a small wooden box, its lid carved with the same spiral from the journal. Her fingers fumbled with the latch, which opened with a click that echoed like a gunshot. Inside was a single object, a brass medallion, heavy and cold, etched with symbols she didn't recognize. Spirals, stars, lines that seemed to shift when she tilted it. At its center was an inscription, worn but legible, per umbras ad astros, to the stars. Elara's stomach twisted. The words felt like a key, but to what? The canvas, the manor, something older, deeper. She clutched the medallion, its edges biting into her palm, and looked back at the canvas. It hadn't changed, but it felt different, as if it knew she'd found something. The whispers returned, softer now. A single voice, paint. Elara's hand moved to her brush before she could stop it. She didn't want to paint, not after that. Face, but her body betrayed her, dipping the brush in black and approaching the canvas. The first stroke was Hersa curve, the start of a jawline. But the canvas took over, the paint spreading into cheekbones, lips, those void-like eyes. The face reappeared, clearer now, its smile sharper, its gaze piercing. Elara's hand froze, but the brush kept moving, guided by something else. The face wasn't her mother's, wasn't hers, was something else, something that didn't belong in this world. She screamed, dropping the brush, and the face dissolved again. The canvas was blank, but the attic was alive. The door rattled, the window flickered, and the shadows surged, forming shapes, hands, eyes, spirals that vanished when she looked directly at them. The whispers were a cacophony now, not words, but emotions, hunger, longing, rage. Elara fell to her knees, clutching the medallion, its cold metal grounding her. The canvas loomed above, its blankness a mockery. It wasn't just a canvas. It was a door, a mirror, a god. She crawled to the journal, desperate for answers. A new page caught her eye, one she hadn't noticed before. The handwriting was Alaric's, but fresher, as if written yesterday. The face is not yours, it is theirs. They see through you, paint through you. Do not let them in. Elara's blood ran cold. She hadn't written it, but the ink was wet, the page warm. The canvas hummed, a low vibration that shook the floorboards, and the face flickered again, just for a moment, its eyes locking onto hers. Elara stumbled to her feet, the medallion clutched to her chest. She wanted to run, to burn the canvas, to flee this cursed place. But the attic door wouldn't open, its handle ice-cold, unyielding. The whispers were her name again, Elara, 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 and the canvas was waiting. She saw it in her mind, even with her eyes closed, the face, the voids, the stars behind it. It was in her dreams now, or maybe she was in it. She turned back, to the canvas, her breath ragged. The face was gone, but it would return. She knew it. The canvas wanted her to paint, to give it form, to let it see. And she would, because she was an artist, and artists were fools. She picked up the brush, the whispers guiding her, and made another stroke. The canvas drank it, and the world began to fade. Chapter 4. Shadows on the Isolde attic was no longer a place, it was a wound, raw and pulsing, and Elara was caught in its center. The air was heavy, thick with the metallic temps of rust and something sweeter, like decay masked by perfume. The round window above the canvas cast a dim, wavering light. The fog outside so dense it seemed to press against the glass, eager to enter. The canvas stood on its ancient easel, its surface a void that shimmered with faint, impossible colors, that burned, reds that bled. Elara's hands were stained with paint, her fingers cramped from gripping the brush, her eyes raw from staring at the canvas that refused to stay still. She hadn't slept, not properly. The night had been a blur of whispers and shadows, the face from yesterday haunting her dreams. Perhaps they weren't dreams at all. The canvas had shown her something, that woman's face with its void-like eyes, and it hadn't let go. She tried to leave the attic, to lock the door and flee Blackthorn Manor, but the house wouldn't let her. The staircase twisted under, her feet leading her back to the attic door. The windows in her bedroom refused to open, their latches rusted shut. The manor was alive, or something in it was, and it wanted her here. Elara stood before the canvas now, the brass medallion from the wooden box clutched in her hand. Its inscription per umbras, ad astro burned in her mind. through shadows to the stars. She didn't know what it meant, but it felt like a promise or a threat. The journal, Elara Voss's mad scribblings, lay open on a crate, its pages fluttering, though no breeze stirred the air. They see through you, paint through you. She wanted to burn it, to burn the canvas, to burn the whole damn manor, but her body wouldn't obey. Her hands itched for the brush, her mind for the canvas's secrets. The whispers were constant now, no longer fragments, but a steady hum, like a choir singing in a language she almost understood. Paint, show us, become. They weren't just in her ears, they were in her blood, her bones urging her to act. She picked up a brush, its bristles stiff with dried paint, and faced the canvas. The shadows in the attic seemed to lean closer, pooling around the easel like spilled ink. They weren't just shadows anymore, they moved, slithering across the floor, curling up the walls, their edges too sharp, too deliberate. Elara dipped the brush in black, her hand trembling. She wanted to paint something safe, something hers, a flower, a skyline, anything to prove she was still in control. But as the brush touched the canvas, the shadows surged. They weren't just on the floor now, they were on the canvas, dark, tendrils weaving through her stroke, turning it into something else. A curve became a jawline, a line became an eye. The face from yesterday flickered, its smile sharper, its eyes deeper, as if it could see her soul. She yanked the brush back, but the shadows followed, spilling off the canvas and onto the easel, the floor, her hands. She stumbled back, her breath ragged. The shadows weren't just moving, they were alive. They twisted into shapes, reaching, mouths gaping, spirals spinning endlessly. The whispers grew louder, a single word now. See. Elara's heart pounded, her eyes darting around the attic. The shadows were everywhere, climbing the walls, pooling under the window, wrapping around the easel like vines. The canvas was blank again, but the shadows lingered, their movements a dance, a warning, a call. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The shadows answered, not with words, but with motion. They flowed toward her, brushing her skin like cold fingers, then retreated to the canvas. The face reappeared, clearer now, its features shifting her mother's cheekbones, her own eyes, but neither, both, something else entirely. The eyes were voids, not empty, but full, brimming with stars, with darkness, with something that watched her back. Elara dropped the brush, the medallion slipping from her hand and clattering to the floor. The shadows surged again, swallowing the light from the window. The attic was darker now, the air colder, the whispers a roar. She fell to her knees, her hands pressed to her ears, but the sound was inside her, inescapable. The shadows moved with purpose, forming shapes on the canvas, a hand, a spiral, a face that wasn't there. She saw it, or thought she did, but when she blinked, it was gone. The attic door rattled, though she hadn't touched it. The floorboards groaned, the walls creaked, and the shadows pulsed like a heartbeat. Elara crawled to the easel, desperate for answers. The canvas was blank, but the easel itself caught her eye. Its wood was ancient, carved with faint symbols she hadn't noticed before. Spirals, stars, lines that matched the medallion. She traced them with her fingers, her skin tingling as if the wood were alive. At the base, hidden in the grain, was a single word, etched so deeply it seemed to bleed. Aeterna. The word hit her like a blow. The canvas wasn't just a thing, it was a conduit, a door to something eternal, something that had always been and always would be. The shadows thickened, their forms clearer now, figures, not human but almost, their eyes echoing the face on the canvas. Elara's breath hitched. The manor was no longer just a house. It was a cage, and the canvas was its heart. She grabbed the journal, flipping through its pages with trembling hands. A new entry caught her eye, one she hadn't seen before, the ink fresh and wet. The shadows are their hands. They reach through the canvas, through you. Do not let them touch your soul. The words weren't Alaric's, they couldn't be, not after centuries, but they were there, written in her own handwriting. Though she hadn't touched a pen, the shadows hissed, a sound like wind through dead trees, and the canvas hummed, its surface rippling like water. Elara backed away, the medallion forgotten on the floor. The shadows followed, slithering across the boards, wrapping around her. Ankles, they were cold, not just in temperature but in presence, like the absence of life itself. She kicked free, stumbling to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The handle was ice, burning her palm, and the shadows were behind her, around her, inside her. The whispers were her name again, Elara, 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 and the canvas was waiting. She turned, unable to resist. The face was back, its smile a blade, its eyes a cosmos. The shadows flowed into it, giving it form, making it real. It wasn't her mother, wasn't her hit, was something older, something that had seen the birth of stars and the death of worlds. Elara's hand moved to the brush, her body no longer her own. She painted, the shadows guiding her, the canvas drinking her strokes. The face grew, its features sharper, its gaze heavier, until it filled the canvas, the attic, her mind. The world was gone. There was only the canvas, the shadows, the face. Elara painted, her hands moving without thought, her soul unraveling. The shadows were her now, or she was theirs. The canvas was eternal, and she was its vessel, its voice, its prey. Chapter 5. The midnight stroke. The attic was no longer a room, it was a pulse, a heartbeat that throbbed in time with Elara's own. The air was thick, saturated with the metallic temps of rust and that cloying sweetness, now sharp enough to sting her throat. The round window above the canvas was dark, the fog outside a solid wall, swallowing the world beyond Blackthorn Manor. The canvas stood on its ancient easel, its surface a restless void, swirling with faint colors that flickered like dying stars. Elara's hands were raw, her fingers crusted with paint that wouldn't come off, her eyes burning from staring too long into the canvas's depths. She hadn't left the attic in days, or so it felt. Time was a lie here, bending and breaking under the canvas's weight. The manor conspired against her, its doors locking, its stairs looping back to the attic. The whispers were her constant companions, no longer just voices, but a presence, wrapping around her mind like threads. Paint, become, midnight. The word midnight echoed loudest, a command she couldn't ignore. She'd tried to resist, to sit in the dark and wait for dawn, but the canvas called, and her body obeyed. Elara clutched the brass medallion, its spiral Landstar design biting into her palm. Per umbris ad astro, shadows to the stars. The words were a riddle, a curse, a key. The journal, Elara Voss's mad scrawl, lay open on a crate, its pages curling as if alive. The shadows are their hands. She hadn't touched it since, finding the new entry written in her own hand, though she swore she hadn't written it. The shadows were everywhere now, slithering across the floor, climbing the walls, pooling around the canvas like blood. They watched her, their forms almost human, their eyes echoing the face she'd seen, the face that wasn't there. The attic was colder than ever, her breath forming clouds that lingered too long, as if the air itself were reluctant to move. The manor groaned, its floorboards creaking in a rhythm that matched the whispers. The shadows pulsed, their edges sharp, their movements deliberate. Elara's gaze flicked to the window, where no stars shone, only fog, thick and alive. She didn't need a clock to know midnight was coming. She felt it, a pressure building in her chest, a pull toward the canvas. She picked up a brush, its bristles frayed from use, and faced the canvas. The shadows gathered, their forms clearer. Now hands, faces, spirals that spun endlessly. The whispers were a chant, urgent and clear. Midnight, paint, show us. Elara's hand shook, her heart pounding. She didn't want to paint, not after the face, the shadows, the way the canvas twisted her work. But her body moved, dipping the brush in crimson, the color glowing like blood in the dim light. The attic seemed to hold its breath as she waited. The shadows stilled, the whispers hushed, and the manor fell silent. Then, from somewhere deep in the house, a clock struck 12 slow, resonant chimes that shook the floorboards. Midnight. Elara's hand moved, the brush touching the canvas. The stroke was hers, a single line, but the canvas took it, spreading the crimson into a curve, a jawline, an eye. The face reappeared, sharper now, its smile a blade, its eyes voids filled with stars that burned with cold fire. Elara gasped, the brush frozen in her hand. The shadows surged, spilling off the canvas and into the attic, wrapping around her like smoke. The air warped, the attic stretching, its walls bending inward as if collapsing into the canvas. The window flickered, showing not fog, but a sky of impossible colors, blues that screamed, reds that wept, stars that pulsed like hearts. The face on the canvas moved, its lips parting, its voice joining the whispers. See us, be us. That the attic was gone, or she was. The canvas was everything, its surface a vortex, pulling her in. Elara painted, her hand guided by the shadows, the whispers, the face. The crimson became flesh, the black became eyes, the gold became light that wasn't light. The face grew, not just on the canvas, but around her, its features filling the attic, the manor, the world. She saw it, her mother's cheekbones, her own lips, but neither, both, something ancient, something that had seen the birth of galaxies and the death of gods. The manor reacted, its walls groaning, its floorboards splitting. The door vanished, replaced by a smooth expanse of wood, as if it had never existed. The mirrors in the attic cracked and dusty reflected, not Elara, but the face, its eyes following her, its smile widening. She dropped the brush, stumbling back, but the shadows caught her, their touch cold and heavy, like hands pulling her down. The canvas hummed, a vibration that shook her bones, and the face spoke again, its voice a chorus of stars. Paint, become, Elara screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the attic's void. She fell to her knees, her hand scrabbling across the floor. Her fingers brushed something harder, hidden panel in the easel's base, unnoticed until now. She pried it open, her nails tearing, and found a folded parchment, its edges brittle, its surface marked with the same spiral as the medallion. The writing was ancient, in a script she couldn't read. But one phrase stood out, written in blood-red ink. The stroke at midnight opens the way. Her heart stopped. The canvas wasn't just a thing, it was a gate, a ritual, a summoning. The shadows tightened, their forms clearer, no figures, not human but almost, their hands reaching, their eyes burning. The face on the canvas flickered, its smile a promise, its eyes a threat. Elara clutched the parchment, her mind racing. She hadn't painted the face, she'd freed it, or part of it. The midnight stroke had done something, changed something. And the canvas was no longer just a canvas. The attic spun, the walls melting, the shadows merging with the face. Elara saw herself in the canvas, not her reflection, but her essence, her fears, her grief, her need to create. The whispers were her voice now, or she was theirs. Paint, become. Midnight. The clock was silent, but the chimes echoed in her head, each one a step deeper into the canvas's will. She crawled to the easel, the parchment crumpled in her hand, and looked at the canvas. The face was gone, but the shadows remained, their forms etched into the surface. Waiting. Elara picked up the brush, her body no longer her own. The shadows guided her, the whispers commanded her, and the canvas drank her strokes. The attic was a void, the manor a dream, and she was the stroke, the paint, the face. Midnight had come, and it would never end. Chapter 6. Eyes that follow the stars. The attic was no longer a space, it was a cosmos, a fragment of eternity trapped in wood and dust. The air was sharp, laced with the metallic bite of rust and a sweetness that now burned like sugar scorched to ash. The round window above the canvas glowed with an unnatural light, the fog outside parting to reveal a sky that wasn't right, stars too bright, too close, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. The canvas stood on its ancient easel, its surface a living thing, pulsing with colors that flickered like dying embers, eyes that stared, and shadows that breathed. Eliara's hands were raw, her fingers stained with paint that seemed to pulse under her skin. Her heart a drumbeat echoing the canvas's rhythm. She hadn't left the attic, though she no longer knew how long she'd been there. Days, weeks, was a thread unraveling in the canvas's grip. The manor had turned against her, its doors vanishing, its halls looping back to the attic. The whispers were no longer whispers, but voices, clear and cold, speaking of stars, of eternity, of her. Paint, show us, become us. They were in her mind, her blood, her soul, and she couldn't tell where she ended and they began. The brass medallion lay forgotten on the floor, its spiral and star design reflecting the canvas's glow. The journal, Elara Voss, Mad Warnings, was silent, its pages still, as if it too bowed to the canvas's will. Elara stood before the canvas, her eyes burning, her body trembling. The shadows were thicker now, not just on the floor, but in the air, weaving around her like threads of a web. They had faces, or the suggestion of faces, their eyes echoing the ones she'd seen on the canvas voids, filled with stars, watching, waiting. The attic was colder, the air so heavy it pressed against her chest, and the manor groaned, its walls pulsing like a living thing. She clutched a brush, its bristles frayed to nothing, and faced the canvas. It wasn't blank anymore, it was alive, its surface a swirl of colors and shapes, eyes that moved, following something she couldn't see. The voices were clear now, a chorus of cold fire. Look to the stars, paint the way. Elara's gaze flicked to the window, where the sky was wronger, tapestry of stars that didn't belong, their light sharp enough to cut. She saw patterns, spirals, constellations that twisted her mind, as if the universe itself were watching her. The canvas hummed, its surface rippling, and the eyes appeared again, 2, then 4, then countless, each pair, a void, a window, 2. Somewhere else. They moved, tracking the stars outside, their gaze both distant and intimate, as if they saw her soul and the cosmos in the same glance. Elara's hand moved, the brush touching the canvas. She wanted to paint something simpler line, a shape to prove she was still herself. But the canvas took her stroke, twisting it into an arc, a curve, an eye. The eye blinked, its pupil a star that burned with cold light, and the voices surged. See us, be us. The shadows moved with the eye, spilling off the canvas and into the attic, wrapping around the easel, the walls, her legs. They were cold, not just in touch, but in essence, like the absence of life itself. Elara stumbled back, the brush falling, but the eye remained, its gaze fixed on her, then on the window, then on her again. The attic warped, the walls bending, the floor tilting as if the manor was sinking into the canvas. The window flickered, showing not just stars but a void, a darkness that pulsed with light, with eyes, with something. The manor groaned, its floorboards splitting, its mirrors cracked and dusty, reflecting not Elara but the canvas, the eyes, the stars. Her reflection was wrong, her face overlaid with those void-like eyes, her smile too wide to knowing. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed. The attic drinking it as it drank her paint. She fell to her knees, her hands scrabbling across the floor. Her fingers brushed the easel, and she noticed something newer carving, hidden in the woods. Grain, revealed by the strange light. It was a star chart, or something like it, etched with spirals and lines that matched the sky outside. At its center was a symbol, the same spiral from the medallion, and a single word. Stellar room of the stars. Elara's breath hitched. The canvas wasn't just a thing, it was a map, a ritual, a bridge to something beyond. The voices were louder now, a chant that shook her bones. Paint the stars, open the way. Elara's hand moved to the brush, her body no longer her own. She painted, the canvas guiding her, the shadows shaping her strokes. The eyes multiplied, filling the canvas, each one a star, a void, a door. The attic was gone, or she was. The world was the canvas, the stars, the eyes. She saw them in her mind, in her reflection, in her dreams. They were watching, not just her, but something larger, something coming. The manor reacted, its walls pulsing, its mirrors shattering. The window was no longer a window, but a portal, showing a sky that wasn't a sky, a cosmos of spinning spirals, burning stars, eyes that followed her every move. Elara painted, her hands moving without thought, her soul fraying. The canvas was no longer just a canvas, it was a god, a gate, a will. The eyes were its voice, and she was its hand. She found a new clue, almost by accident, a scrap of cloth caught in the easel's frame, embroidered with the same star chart, the same word, Starem. It was old, impossibly so, its threads glowing, faintly, as if woven from starlight. The voices whispered its meaning. The stars are watching. Paint them, become them. Elara's heart pounded, her mind screaming to stop, but her body obeyed, the brush moving, the canvas drinking. The eyes grew, their gaze heavier, their lights colder, until they filled the attic, the manor, her mind. The clock struck midnight again, though she hadn't heard it before. The chimes were a pulse, a call, a command. Elara painted the shadows, merging with her, the eyes merging with her. She was no longer just Elarashi, was the stroke, the paint, the stars. The canvas was eternal, and she was its vessel, its voice, its prey. The eyes followed the stars, and the stars followed her, and there was no escape. Chapter 7. The pact with the unknown. The attic was no longer a place. It was a wound in reality. Bleeding starlight and shadow. The air was sharp, heavy with the metallic temps of rust, and a sweetness that now burned like poison, coating Ela's throat with every breath. The round window above the canvas glowed with an unearthly light, its glass rippling as if liquid, revealing a sky that wasn't a sky stars, that spun in spirals, too bright, too alive, their patterns etching themselves into her mind. The canvas stood on its ancient easel, its surface a vortex of colors and eyes, pulsing with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Elara's hands were no longer her own, stained with paint that seemed to writhe under her skin, her eyes raw from staring into the canvas's depths where something stared back. Time had abandoned her. Days, weeks, eternities, she couldn't tell how long she'd been in the attic, trapped by the manor's will. The doors were gone, the stairs a loop that led back to the canvas. The whispers were no longer just voices, they were a presence. A weight, a will that pressed against her soul. Paint become, join us. They spoke of stars, of pacts, of something vast and ancient that needed her. The brass medallion lay forgotten on the floor, its spiral landstar design glowing faintly, as if alive. The journal, Elara Voss's warnings, was silent, its pages blank now, as if the canvas had erased them. The shadows were everywhere, not just on the walls, but in her thoughts. Their eyes watching, their hands guiding. Elara stood before the canvas, her body trembling, her mind a fraying thread. The shadows were thicker now, not just shapes, but entities. Their forms almost human, their eyes echoing the canvases, filled with stars, burning with cold fire. The manor groaned, its walls pulsing, its floorboards bending as if bowing to the canvas. The mirrors, cracked and dusty, reflected not her but the canvas, its eyes, its spirals, her face overlaid with something else, something that wasn't human. She clutched a brush, its bristles broken, and faced the canvas. It wasn't just a canvas anymore, it was a door, a god, a will, and it wanted her. The voices were clear now, a dialogue, not a chant. Paint the pact, join the stars, be eternal. They weren't just urging, they were bargaining, offering something she couldn't name, something that felt like power and terror in equal measure. Elara's hand shook, the brush hovering over the canvas. She wanted to resist, to run, to burn it all, but her body wouldn't obey. The canvas was in her, or she was in it, and the line between them was gone. The eyes on the canvas moved, tracking the stars through the window, their gaze both distant and intimate, as if they saw her and the cosmos as one. She dipped the brush in black, the paint glowing like liquid night. The canvas hummed, its surface rippling, and the eyes multiplied, each one a star, a void, a promise. Elara painted, her stroke a line, a curve, a spiral. The canvas took it, twisting it into something else, a shape, a symbol, a ritual. The shadows surged, spilling off the canvas and into the attic, wrapping around her like a shroud. The air warped, the attic stretching, its walls melting into a starfield, its floor a void. The window was no longer a window, but a portal, showing a cosmos of spinning spirals, burning eyes, and a darkness that pulsed with life. The canvas showed her something, a vision, a memory, a truth. It wasn't just the face now, but a scene. Figures in robes, standing in a circle under a sky of impossible stars. Their hands raised to a canvas that glowed with the same light as hers. They chanted, their voices echoing the whispers, their eyes voids like the ones she'd painted. The canvas was their altar, their pact, their bridge to something beyond. Elara's hand froze, the brush trembling. The vision shifted, showing her own face among them, her eyes stir-filled, her hands stained with paint that wasn't paint, but blood, or light, or both. The manor reacted, its walls closing in, its mirrors shattering into starlight. The floorboards split, revealing glimpses of the same starry void she'd seen in the window. The voices spoke again, softer now, a promise. Paint and be eternal. Resist and be nothing. Elara's heart pounded, her mind screaming to stop, but the canvas was in her, its will her will. She painted, the shadows guiding her, the eyes watching. The canvas showed a spiral, a star, a hand reaching from the void, and she knew it wasn't hers, was theirs, the ones who had made the pact, the ones who waited. She stumbled back, the brush falling, and her hands brushed the easel. A hidden compartment clicked open, revealing a small, leather-bound book, its cover etched with the same spiral as the medallion. Inside were pages of symbol stars, eyes, spirals, and a single sentence in red ink. The pact is sealed with the stroke, the soul with the stars. Elara's breath caught. The canvas wasn't just a thing, it was a ritual, a contract, a summoning. The shadows tightened, their forms clearer, no figures, not human but almost, their hands reaching, their eyes burning with starlight. The voices were her voice now, or she was theirs. Paint, join, become. Elara's body moved, picking up the brush, dipping it in gold. The canvas drank it, the spiral growing, the eyes multiplying, the stars spilling into the attic. The manor was gone, or she was, the world was the canvas, the pact, the unknown. She saw herself in the mirrors, her face no longer hers but theirs, her eyes voids, her smile a promise. The shadows merged with her, the canvas merged with her, and she painted, her soul unraveling. The clock struck midnight, though no clock remained. The chimes were a pulse, a call, a seal. Elara painted, the canvas guiding her, the stars watching. The pact was forming, and she was, its heart, its hand, its price. She was no longer just Elara, she was the stroke, the paint, the stars. The canvas was eternal, and she had made her choice, or it had made it for her. Chapter 8. Colors of a Forgotten Realm. The attic was no longer a room, it was a fracture in the universe, a place where reality bled into something else. The air was thick, saturated with the metallic temps of rust and a sweetness that now burned, like acid, searing Elara's lungs with every breath. The round window above the canvas shimmered, its glass no longer glass but a liquid veil, revealing a sky that wasn't a sky, stars that pulsed with colors no human eye should see, blues that screamed, reds that wept, greens that writhed like living things. The canvas stood on its ancient easel, its surface a chaos of hues and forms, a living wound that pulsed with alien light. Elara's hands were no longer hands but instruments, stained with paint that glowed under her skin, her eyes burning with visions she couldn't unsee. Time was gone, or she was. The manor had become a labyrinth, its halls twisting, its doors melting into walls. The whispers were no longer separate from her, they were her thoughts, her pulse, her will. Paint, Show the realm, become the realm. They spoke of a place forgotten, a place that remembered her. The brass medallion lay abandoned on the floor, its spiral and star design pulsing in time with the canvas. The journal was gone, its pages dissolved into the attic's shadows, as if the canvas had consumed it. The shadows themselves were alive, not just shapes, but entities, their forms weaving through the air, their eyes glowing with the same colors as the canvas. Elara stood before the canvas, her body trembling, her mind a thread stretched to breaking. The shadows were everywhere, curling round her like smoke, their forms almost human, their eyes voids filled with alien light. The manor groaned, its walls bleeding colors that matched the canvas blues that burned, reds that dripped like blood, greens that pulsed like veins. The mirrors shattered and scattered reflected, not her, but the canvas. Its colors, its eyes, her face overlaid with something that wasn't her, something that belonged to the stars. The voices were a chorus now, clear and cold. Paint the realm. Open the way. Ilara's hand shook, clutching a brush with bristles that seemed to writhe. She didn't want to paint, not after the eyes, the pact, the way the canvas had claimed her. But her body moved, dipping the brush in a color she didn't recognize, a hue that shimmered between violet and nothing, a color that hurt to look at. The canvas hummed, its surface rippling like water, and she painted, her stroke a line, a curve, a shape that wasn't hers. The canvas took it, twisting it into something else, a landscape, or the memory of one, with spires of crystal that bled, light skies that spun with stars, rivers that flowed upward into voids. The colors weren't just colors, they were alive, pulsing, screaming, each one a piece of a realm that didn't belong. Ilara's hand moved, painting hills that shifted, trees that whispered, eyes that watched from the canvas's depths. The shadows surged, spilling off the canvas and into the attic, wrapping around her, their touch cold and heavy, like hands pulling her into the painting. The attic warped, the walls melting into the canvas's colors, the floor buckling as if sinking into the realm she painted. The window was no longer a window but a portal, showing not just stars but a world, a forgotten realm of spiraling towers, endless skies, and eyes that filled the horizon. The voices spoke again, not a chant but a promise: paint and see, become and know. Ilara's heart pounded, her mind screaming to stop, but the canvas was in her, its colors her blood, its forms her thoughts. She saw it, a vision, or a memory, or a truth. The canvas showed her a realm, not just a place, but a will, a presence, that had waited for eternities. Figures stood in its light, their forms not human, but almost, their hands raised to a canvas that glowed with the same colors as hers. They painted, their strokes a ritual, their eyes voids like the ones she'd seen. The realm was theirs, or they were its, and Elara was part of it now. Her strokes, their strokes, her soul, their soul. The manor reacted, its walls pulsing with the canvas's colors, its mirrors showing not her, but the realm spires, skies, eyes that watched. The floorboards split, revealing glimpses of the same alien landscape, its colors seeping into the attic like ink. Ilara's hand froze, the brush trembling, but the canvas painted through her, the colors spreading, the forms growing. She saw her mother's face in the painting, or her own, or neither, cheekbones sharp as blades, eyes that burned with starlight, a smile that promised eternity. She stumbled back, the brush falling, and her hands brushed the easel. A hidden groove caught her fingers, revealing a small crystalline shard embedded in the wood, glowing with the same alien colors as the canvas. It was warm, pulsing, and etched with a single symbol spiral. Like the medallion, but alive, its lines shifting under her touch. The voices whispered its meaning. The realm remembers. Paint it, become it. Elara's breath caught. The canvas wasn't just a gate, it was a memory, a fragment of a realm that wanted to return. The colors were in her now, not just on her hands, but in her eyes, her mind, her blood. She saw them when she blinked, blues that screamed, reds that wept, greens that pulsed. The shadows tightened, their forms clearer figures, not human but almost, their hands painting, their eyes glowing. The canvas was no longer just a canvas, it was a realm, a will, a god. Elara painted her body, no longer her own, the colors guiding her, the voices commanding her. The clock struck midnight, though no clock remained. The chimes were a pulse, a call, a birth. Elara painted, the canvas drinking her strokes, the realm spilling into the attic. The manor was gone, or she was, the world was the canvas, the colors, the realm. She saw herself in the mirrors, her face no longer hers but theirs, her eyes voids, her body a vessel. The realm was coming, and she was its door, its hand, its price. Chapter 9. The frame that binds the attic was no longer a fragment of the world. It was a prison forged from starlight and shadow, where reality bent and broke under the weight of the canvas and its frame. The air was thick, saturated with the metallic tang of rust and a sweetness that now clawed at Elara's throat, like venom disguised as honey. The round window above the canvas shimmered, its glass a liquid mirror reflecting a sky of alien stars, spirals that spun, colors that burned, eyes that watched with cold indifference. The canvas stood on its ancient easel, its surface a living chaos of hues and forms, pulsing with the forgotten realm's light. The frame, carved with spirals and stars, glowed faintly, its wood no longer wood but something alive, binding the canvas to the attic, to Elara, to eternity. Time was a memory, lost in the canvas's pull. The manor had become a labyrinth, its halls dissolving into walls, its doors sealed by an unseen will. The whispers were no longer separate, they were Elara's thoughts, her breath, her soul. Paint, bind, become. They spoke of the frame, of a pact sealed in wood and starlight, of a realm that demanded her. The brass medallion lay forgotten, its spiral and star design swallowed by the shadows. The journal was gone, its pages dust, as if the canvas and its frame had erased all but their own truth. The shadows were alive, weaving through the air, their forms almost human, their eyes glowing with the canvas's colors, their hands reaching for the frame. Elara stood before the canvas, her body trembling, her mind a fraying thread. The frame was no longer just an easlet, was a presence, its carvings pulsing with the same rhythm as the canvas, its wood warm under her touch, as if alive. The shadows curled around it, their forms clearer now figures, not human but almost, their hands tracing the frame's spirals, their eyes echoing the canvas's voids. The manor groaned, its walls pulsing with alien colors, its mirrors shattered and scattered reflecting, not Elara but the frame, its carvings, her face bound within its lines, her eyes no longer hers but theirs. The voices were a dialogue now, cold and clear. Paint the frame, seal the pact, be the realm. They weren't just commanding, they were binding, tying her to the canvas, to the frame, to something vast and eternal. Elara's hand shook, clutching a brush with bristles that seemed to pulse like veins. She didn't want to paint, not after the colors, the eyes, the realm that had claimed her. But her body moved, dipping the brush in a color that wasn't. A color, a hue that shimmered between existence and nothing. A light that burned her eyes. The frame hummed, its carvings glowing as she touched the canvas. The stroke was hers, a line, a curve, a spiral, but the frame took it, channeling it into the canvas, amplifying its power. The canvas responded, its surface rippling, showing not just the realm, but the frame's roll, a lattice of light, a web of stars, a binding that held the realm in check. Elara painted, the shadows guiding her, the voices shaping her strokes. The canvas showed us scene figures in a circle, their hands on a frame like hers, their eyes voids, their voices chanting. A ritual that echoed the whispers. The frame was their anchor, their seal, their cage. The attic warped, the walls melting into the frame's spirals, the floor buckling as if sinking into the canvas. The window was no longer a window but a portal, showing a realm of spiraling towers, burning skies, and eyes that filled the horizon. The voices spoke again, a promise and a threat. Paint and be bound, resist and be lost. Elara's heart pounded, her mind screaming to stop, but the frame was in her, its carvings, her pulse, its will, her will. She painted the canvas and frame, working as one, the colors spreading, the forms growing spires, stars, eyes that watched from beyond. The manor reacted, its walls closing in, its mirrors showing Elara bound within the frame. Her body a silhouette of starlight, her eyes voids. The floorboards split, revealing glimpses of the realm's landscape, its colors seeping into the attic like blood. Elara's hand froze, the brush trembling, but the frame painted through her, the canvas drinking her strokes. She saw her mother's face in the painting, or her own, or neither, cheekbones sharp as knives, eyes that burned with starlight, a smile that promised eternity. She stumbled back, the brush falling, and her hands brushed the frame. A hidden carving caught her fingers, revealing a new symbol, a star within a spiral, etched with a single word, binding. Elara's breath caught. The frame wasn't just a support, it was a seal, a lock, a conduit for the canvases. Power, the voices whispered its meaning. The frame binds the realm. Paint it, become it. The shadows tightened, their forms clearer figures, not human but almost, their hands tracing the frame, their eyes glowing with starlight. Elara's body shook, her mind fraying. The colors were in her now, not just in her hands, but in her blood, her bones, her soul. She saw them when she blinked, blues that screamed, reds that wept, greens that pulsed. The frame was in her, too, its carvings etched into her mind, its will binding her to the canvas. She painted, her body no longer her own, the shadows guiding her, the voices commanding her. The canvas and frame were one, a ritual, a pact. Summoning, the clock struck midnight, though no clock remained. The chimes were a pulse, a call, a binding. Elara painted, the frame channeling her strokes, the canvas drinking her soul. The manor was gone, or she was. The world was the canvas, the frame, the realm. She saw herself in the mirrors, her face, no longer hers but theirs, her body bound within the frame's spirals, her eyes voids. The frame was eternal, and she was its vessel, its voice, its price. Chapter 10. Echoes of the Painted Void. The attic was no longer a space, it was a void, a fracture where reality unraveled into nothingness. The air was sharp, heavy with the metallic temps of rust and a sweetness that now burned like ash, searing Elara's lungs with every breath. The round window above the canvas was gone, replaced by a shimmering void that pulsed with alien light stars that screamed, colors that bled, echoes that reverberated like a heartbeat from beyond. The canvas stood on its ancient easel, its surface a living chaos of hues and forms, a painted void that hummed with the weight of eternity. The frame, carved with spirals and stars, glowed with a cold fire, binding the canvas to the attic, to Elara, to the void itself. Time was a ghost, lost in the canvas's pull. The manor was no longer a house, but a labyrinth of dissolving walls and endless voids, its halls folding into themselves, its doors swallowed by shadow. The whispers were no longer whispers, they were Elara's thoughts, her breath, her soul. Paint, become the void, echo us. They spoke of a nothingness that was alive, a realm that remembered her, a void that needed her. The brass medallion was gone, consumed by the shadows, its spiral and star design etched into the air. The journal was dust, its warnings erased by the canvas's will. The shadows were everywhere, not just shapes, but entities, their forms weaving through the void, their eyes glowing with the canvas's light, their hands reaching for the frame. Elara stood before the canvas, her body trembling, her mind a shattered mirror. The frame was alive, its carvings pulsing with the canvas's rhythm, its wood warm and thrumming under her touch. The shadows were thicker now, their forms almost human, their eyes voids filled with the colors of the forgotten realm, blues that burned, reds that wept, greens that pulsed. The manor groaned, its walls dissolving into starlight, its mirrors and scattered reflecting, not Elara, but the void, its eyes, its echoes, her face overlaid with something that wasn't her, something that belonged to the nothingness. The voices were a chorus now, cold and vast. Paint the void, echo the stars, be eternal. They weren't just commanding, they were consuming, pulling her into the canvas, the frame, the void. Elara's hand shook, clutching a brush with bristles that seemed to writhe like veins. She didn't want to paint, not after the colors, the eyes, the realm that had claimed her soul. But her body moved, dipping the brush in a hue that wasn't a hue, a color that shimmered between existence and oblivion, a light that burned her mind. The frame hummed, its carvings glowing as she touched the canvas. The stroke was hers, a line, a curve, a spiral, but the canvas took it, channeling it into the void. The surface rippled, producing echo sounds that weren't sounds, visions that weren't visions, sensations that crawled under her skin. The canvas showed a scene, nothingness filled with stars, spires that dissolved into light, eyes that watched from nowhere. The echoes were alive, reverberating through the attic, through Elara, blending her memories with the void's truth. She saw her mother's face, or her own, or neither, cheekbones, sharp as blades, eyes that burned with starlight, a smile that echoed eternity. The attic warped, the walls melting into the void, the floor buckling as if sinking into nothingness. The window was no longer a portal, but the void itself, showing a realm of endless darkness, burning stars and echoes that pulsed like a heartbeat. The voices spoke again, a promise and a threat. Paint and echo, resist and dissolve. Heart pounded, her mind screaming to stop, but the frame was in her, its carvings her pulse, its will her will. She painted, the canvas and frame working as one, the echoes spreading, the void growing spires, stars, eyes that watched from beyond. The manor reacted, its walls dissolving into starlight, its mirrors showing Elara as part of the void, her body a silhouette of echoes, her eyes nothingness. The floorboards split, revealing glimpses of the void's landscape, its colors seeping into the attic like blood. Elara's hand froze, the brush trembling, but the canvas painted through her, the frame channeling her strokes. She saw a vision, circle of figures, their hands on a frame like hers, their voices echoing the whispers, their eyes voids that sang of nothingness. The void was their home, their god, their price, and Elara was part of it now. Her strokes, her soul, their echo. She stumbled back, the brush falling, and her hands brushed the frame. A hidden resonance caught her sense as a sound, low and thrumming, emanating from the wood, like a heartbeat from the void. She pressed her ear to the frame, and the sound grew, forming words. The void echoes, paint it, become it. Elara's breath caught. The canvas wasn't just a game, was a voice, a will, a void that wanted to sing through her. The shadows tightened, their forms clearer figures, not human but almost, their hands echoing her strokes, their eyes glowing with starlight. Elara's body shook, her mind dissolving. The echoes were in her now, not just in her ears, but in her blood, her bones, her soul. She heard them when she breathed sounds that weren't sounds, visions that weren't visions, memories that weren't hers. The frame was in her, too, its carvings etched into her mind, its will binding her to the void. She painted, her body no longer her own, the shadows guiding her, the voices echoing her. The canvas and frame were one, a ritual, a summoning, a song. The clock struck midnight, though no clock remained. The chimes were a pulse, a call, an echo. Elara painted, the frame channeling her strokes, the canvas drinking her soul. The manor was gone, or she was, the world was the canvas, the frame, the void. She saw herself in the mirrors, her face, no longer hers, but theirs, her body an echo, her eyes nothingness. The void was coming, and she was its voice, its hand, its price. Chapter 11. The artist's final mark. The attic was no longer a place, it was the edge of existence. A crucible where reality burned away into the void. The air was sharp, saturated with the metallic temps of rust and a sweetness that now clawed at Elara's throat, like a venom that promised oblivion. The round window was gone, its frame a gaping wound in the wall, spilling starlight that wasn't light colors that screamed, blues that bled, reds that pulsed with a life of their own. The canvas stood on its ancient easel, its surface a chaotic tapestry of the forgotten realm, a living void that sang with eyes, spirals, and forms that defied the world. The frame, carved with spirals and stars, glowed with a cold fire, its wood thrumming like a heartbeat, binding Elara to the canvas, to the void, to eternity. Time was a lie, dissolved in the canvas's pull. The manor was no longer a house, but a collapsing dream, its walls melting into starlight, its halls folding into nothingness. The whispers were no longer separate, they were Elara's thoughts, her breath, her soul. Paint. Complete the mark, become the void. They spoke of a ritual, a merging, a world undone by a hand. The brass medallion was gone, its spiral landstar design etched into the air, pulsing with the canvas's light. The journal was dust, its warnings consumed by the shadows. The shadows themselves were alive, weaving through the void, their forms almost human, their eyes glowing with the canvas's colors, their hands reaching for the frame, Elara stood before the canvas, her body trembling, her mind a shattered thread. The frame was no longer just a frame, it was a chain, its carvings pulsing with the canvas's rhythm, its will binding her soul. The shadows were everywhere, curling around her like smoke, their forms clearer, no figures. Not human, but almost. Their eyes, voids filled with starlight, their hands echoing her strokes. The manor groaned, its walls collapsing into the canvas's colors. Its mirrors shattered and scattered, reflecting not Elara, but the void. Its eyes, its spirals, her face overlaid with something that wasn't her, something that belonged to the stars. The voices were a command now, cold and vast. Paint the final mark. Open the void. Be eternal. They weren't just commanding, they were consuming, pulling her into the canvas, the frame, the nothingness. Elara's hand shook, clutching a brush with bristles that pulsed like veins. She didn't want to paint, not after the colors, the eyes, the realm that had claimed her. But her body moved, dipping the brush in a hue that wasn't a hue, a color that shimmered between existence and oblivion, a light that burned her soul. The frame hummed, its carvings glowing as she touched the canvas. The stroke was hers, a line, a curve, a spiral, but the canvas took it, channeling it into the void. The surface rippled, producing a Vizuna world consumed by starlight. Spires that dissolved into nothingness, eyes that filled the sky. The echoes were louder now, not just sounds, but sensations crawling under her skin, blending her memories with the void's truth. She saw her mother's face, or her own, or neither, cheekbones sharp as blades, eyes that burned with starlight, a smile that promised annihilation. The attic collapsed, the walls melting into the void, the floor buckling as if sinking into nothingness. The window was no longer a portal, but the void itself, showing a realm of endless darkness, burning stars, and eyes that watched with cold hunger. The voices spoke again, a promise and a threat, paint and complete. Resist and be nothing. Elara's heart pounded, her mind screaming to stop, but the frame was in her, its carvings, her pulse, its will, her will. She painted, the canvas and frame working as one, the void spreading, the stars growing spires, eyes forms that sang of eternity. The manor reacted, its walls dissolving into starlight, its mirrors showing Elara as part of the void, her body a silhouette of spirals, her eyes nothingness. The floorboards split, revealing glimpses of the void's landscape, its colors seeping into the attic like blood. Elara's hand froze, the brush trembling, but the canvas painted through her, the frame channeling her strokes. She saw a circle of figures, their hands on a frame like hers, their voices echoing the whispers, their eyes voids that sang of nothingness. The void was their home, their god, their price, and Elara was part of it now, her strokes, their strokes, her soul, their echo. She stumbled back, the brush falling, and her hands brushed the canvas. A hidden resonance caught her senses of vibration, low and thrumming, emanating from the frame like a heartbeat from the void. She pressed her hand to the carvings, and a vision surged through her ritual, ancient and eternal, where the canvas and frame were forged to bind the void to the world. The final mark was the key, the stroke that would open the way, merging the void with reality, consuming all. The voices whispered its meaning. The mark binds the void. Paint it, become it. Elara's body shook, her mind dissolving. The echoes were in her now, not just in her ears, but in her blood, her bones, her soul. She heard them when she breathed sounds that weren't sounds, visions that weren't visions, memories that weren't hers. The frame was in her, too, its carvings etched into her mind, its will binding her to the void. A spark of herself remained, a flicker of defiance, screaming to stop, to break the frame, to burn the canvas. But the voices were louder, the shadows stronger, the canvas eternal. She picked up the brush, her body no longer her own, the shadows guiding her, the voices commanding her. The canvas and frame were one, a ritual, a summoning, a merging. The clock struck midnight, though no clock remained. The chimes were a pulse, a call, a finality. Elara painted, the frame channeling her stroke, the canvas drinking her soul. The void was coming, and she was its hand, its voice, its mark. She made the final stroke, a spiral that burned with starlight, and the world began to unravel. Chapter 12. The portrait's eternal gaze. The attic was no longer a place, it was the void itself. A wound in existence where reality dissolved into starlight and shadow. The air was sharp, saturated with the metallic temps of rust and a sweetness that burned like ash, searing Elara's lungs with every ragged breath. The round window was gone, its frame a gaping maw that spilled a cosmos of alien stars, spirals that screamed, colors that bled, eyes that watched with cold eternity. The canvas stood on its ancient easel, its surface a completed portrait, a living chaos of hues and forms that sang of the forgotten realm. The frame, carved with spirals and stars, pulsed with a cold fire. Its wood a heartbeat that bound Elara to the canvas, to the void, to forever. Time was nothing, a memory consumed by the canvas's will. The manor was no longer a house, but a collapsing dream, its walls melting into starlight, its halls swallowed by nothingness. The whispers were no longer separate. They were Elara's thoughts, her breath, her soul. Paint, complete the portrait, become the void. They spoke of a ritual fulfilled, a world undone, a gaze that would never end. The brass medallion was gone, its spiral landstar design etched into the air, pulsing with the canvas's light. The journal was dust, its warnings erased by the void's truth. The shadows were everywhere, weaving through the nothingness, their forms almost human, their eyes glowing with the portrait's colors, their hands reaching for the frame. Elara stood before the canvas, her body trembling, her mind a shattered remnant. The frame was no longer a frame, it was a chain, a seal, a god, its carvings pulsing with the canvas's rhythm, its will binding her soul to the void. The shadows were alive, curling around her like smoke, their forms clearer, no figures, not human but almost, their eyes voids filled with starlight, their hands echoing her final stroke. The manor groaned, its walls dissolving into the portraits. Colors blues that burned, reds that wept, greens that pulsed like veins. The mirrors shattered and scattered reflected, not Elara, but the portrait. Its eyes, its spirals, her face overlaid with something that wasn't her, something that belonged to eternity. The voices were a command now, vast and final. Paint the portrait, seal the void, be eternal. They weren't just commanding, they were consuming, pulling her into the canvas, the frame, the nothingness. Elara's hand shook, clutching a brush with bristles that pulsed like veins. She didn't want to paint, not after the colors, the eyes, the realm that had claimed her. But her body moved, dipping the brush in a hue that wasn't a hue or color, that shimmered between existence and oblivion, a light that burned her soul. The frame hummed, its carvings glowing as she touched the canvas. The stroke was hers, a line, a curve, a spiral, but the canvas took it, completing the portrait. The surface rippled, revealing the forgotten realm in fuller world of spiraling towers, burning skies, and eyes that filled the horizon. The portrait was alive, its gaze eternal, its colors a song of annihilation. Elara saw her mother's face, or her own, or neither, cheekbones sharp as blades, eyes that burned with starlight, a smile that promised oblivion. The portrait was complete, and it was her, or she was it. The attic collapsed, the walls melting. Into the void, the floor buckling as if sinking into nothingness. The window was no longer a portal, but the void itself, showing a realm of endless darkness, burning stars, and eyes that watched with cold hunger. The voices spoke again, a promise fulfilled. The portrait sees. The void is here. Elara's heart pounded, her mind screaming to stop, but the frame was in her, its carvings, her pulse, its will, her will. The portrait stared, its gaze piercing. Her soul, the manor, the world. The manor reacted, its walls dissolving into starlight, its mirrors showing Elara as part of the portrait. Her body a silhouette of spirals, her eyes nothingness. The floorboards split, revealing glimpses of the void's landscape, its colors seeping into the attic like blood. Elara's hand froze, the brush trembling, but the portrait painted through her, the frame channeling her soul. She saw a circle of figures, their hands on a frame like hers, their voices echoing the whispers, their eyes voids that sang of nothingness. The portrait was their god, their price, their eternity, and Elara was its final stroke. A spark of herself remained, a flicker of defiance buried deep. She saw it in the mirrors, her own eyes, not yet voids, not yet theirs. The voices roared, the shadows tightened, the portrait's gaze burned. Complete, become, be eternal. But the sparks screamed, a memory of her mother, of her art, of a life. Before the canvas, she clutched the brush, her hand shaking, and faced the portrait. The void was coming, its eyes filling the attic, its colors swallowing the world. She could finish it, become it, or she could fight, though the cost was her soul. Elara's breath caught, her mind a battlefield. The spark flared, a memory of her mother's voice. Paint what matters, not what consumes. She raised the brush, not to paint, but to strike, to tear the canvas, to break the frame. But the shadows surged, their hands cold and heavy, pulling her back. The portrait's gaze held her, its eyes voids that promised eternity, its smile a blade that cut her soul. She screamed, the sound swallowed by the void, and the brush moved, not to destroy, but to paint. The final stroke was hers, or theirs, she couldn't tell. The portrait was complete, its gaze eternal, its colors a cosmos that consumed the attic, the manor, the world. The void spilled through, its eyes watching, its spirals spinning, its will fulfilled. Elara was no longer Elara, she was the portrait. The void, the gaze, the manor was gone, or she was, the world was the canvas, the frame, the nothingness. The portrait stared, its eyes eternal, and the void looked back, forever.